Just north of Pembina, North Dakota, I think, is a little shtetl called Winnipeg.
Right.
Winnipeg. We have something in common. I do with David Steinberg, who's with us, who took some time out of his busy day to share with us thoughts of Winnipeg and other things.
Yes.
Nice to see you again,
Yes.
David.
Winnipeg, Fargo is the next big city next to Winnipeg.
Okay.
And in Winnipeg, when I grew up as a kid, we used to go to Fargo, and when people would come back, they'd say, well, what are they wearing in Fargo? Like it was Paris.
Oh, well, I don't have that much of a magic. My connection with Fargo was my grandparents had a cottage in northern Minnesota, and we'd cross 45 miles into the border at Moorhead and Fargo. We could buy fireworks in Fargo.
Yeah, you can buy, yes, in the States, right.
Same for Canada, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll go to North Dakota
Yes.
and pile up all this fireworks and kind of blow up our communities.
Yeah.
Wow, what a history, though, Canada, and especially Winnipeggers seem to know each other. There's a camaraderie.
Yeah, the Jewish community in Winnipeg is so unique. You know, in Canada, the Jewish community is more unique, is unique in a way that it isn't in the States. It's a very culturally Jewish atmosphere that I grew up with in Winnipeg. There was a little shul on every corner. I'm not exaggerating. In one block that was my dad's shul, there were 6 blocks, and every block had a little shul of a congregation of 80 people, 90 people, whatever. And you know, it was Orthodox. You would have the women on top and the men below, and the balcony, women in the balcony. But it was more about the culture. The culture of Yiddish was very strong when I grew up in the 40s and 50s. And my folks spoke Yiddish. My father and my uncle, his brother and his sister, and we were a very close family, they spoke Yiddish all the time. And then when they didn't want us to understand, they talked Russian to each other, which is a lot of time.
I remember there was a Yiddish newspaper, actually.
The Yiddish Avort. The Yiddish Avort was a Yiddish newspaper. Then there are 2 English weekly Jewish newspapers. And then they were early Zionists, as most of the Canadian Jews were.
And I think the Jewish community in Winnipeg, somewhere between 10 and 20,000. We're not talking
20,000.
huge numbers,
Yeah.
you know, here.
20,000, the population was 400,000, 450,000. Now it's almost 1 million people. I don't know what the Jewish population is. But it was culturally significant to grow up there. When I talked to all my contemporaries, all my friends who grew up in Winnipeg, who I'm still friends with, and my cousins, they wouldn't trade having grown up in Winnipeg for any other place in the world. It just was a great place to be a kid.
Well, I had a scary great aunt, so I had a problem when we visited Winnipeg. She lived on Bannerman, which I think maybe it's
a block away from where I am.
1 block away. But she had dusty doilies in her house, you know, like you'd shake them up and dust with from like
Yes.
100 years ago.
Yes.
But my Aunt Fanny. You know.
Aunt Fatty, yeah. I had, my Aunt Dussie was in Chicago, my Aunt Ziesel, my Uncle Israel. And of course in Winnipeg in those years, there is no family. If you scratch a Winnipegger, a Jewish Winnipegger, you'll find a communist in his family somewhere, a socialist.
At least a socialist.
At least a socialist, right, exactly.
There is something you alluded to, something different about Canadians in general. Jewish Canadians or Canadians, but on the focus of Jewish Canadians, the war broke out. There were a number of Jews, men, pilots, those who wanted to fight for the Jewish people. Your late brother was one.
Yes.
One example that
Yes.
he didn't have to go to the Royal Air Force,
No.
but he opted to.
Yes, yeah. He was the youngest pilot gunner. He was Jewish, which was unusual in and of itself. He was 17, and he was killed when he was 19 years old, coming back from Iceland. Yeah, there was sacrifice on every level. They loved being Canadian, my parents having come from Russia. My mother and her sister seeing my grandfather shot right in front of them. And so they were never, ever not appreciative of being Canadian in any way, ever. My dad, when I would drive with him, and he would go from grocery store to grocery store when he was a salesman for a period in his life. And when he would want to challenge me about certain words that he knew, he would say, "Canadian born, what is superficial if you're so smart?" Challenging me on a new word. He learned superficial. Not a bad word to sort of, mark me with, but it was always Canadian born because they were really proud of it, actually.
Really proud. I believe, going back to Winnipeg for a split second here, that the mayor today of Winnipeg is Jewish. I'm pretty sure about that.
I don't really know the politics of Canada anymore because I'm not there.
I don't understand the politics of America.
No, that's more difficult.
Let alone Winnipeg and who's mayor.
But I go back to Winnipeg. I went back to do a CBC show on Jewish humor, and I go back. It's very sort of nostalgic for me to go back and reminiscent of things that I remember.
Jewish humor. Who stole the Kishka? Where that came from?
Is that a Mickey Katz song? It sounds like
something sung in Toronto, I believe.
Mickey Katz used to do, the Hanukkah in Santa Monica.
The parodies. Yeah.
I used to always make up my own Tu B'Shvat and Yucca Flat. I would try to do a title that I could sell to him. He was Joe Gray's father, as I'm sure you know.
Where did you get the need to make people laugh?
I don't know where my family were all funny. My father was funny. My mother wasn't funny. My father was funny. My uncle, when my uncle and aunt would get together, I mean, they would say that they were the dirtiest in Yiddish of anyone. They knew if there is any obscenity in Yiddish, my aunt and my dad would be using it. They were always, everything was about humor. I mean, there's so much of Jewish life is about humor because so much of it is oppressive or had been oppressive. So the liberation of being in a free country, they were just let loose. And I grew up with that. And I was always funny. I always was funny. I was always, it helps to be in trouble to be funny. Mm-hmm. So I was always in trouble, so that was my only way out, is to hopefully charm somebody.
When were you allowed out of Winnipeg, and how did that happen?
I left when I was 15.
Did you leave on your own volition?
I did, actually. I got a scholarship, and I left at 15 and a half, and I went to a yeshiva in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago. It was an Orthodox yeshiva. I wore a kippah for a long time until I went to Israel when I was 17, and I met an Algerian communist socialist girl, and my kippah became a frisbee, and I sort of followed her wherever she wanted me to go politically and anywhere. But
there goes the kippah.
There goes the kippah, exactly. But I left at 15 and a half, and then I was at the University of Chicago for a while, and from there into Second City, University of Chicago.
I mean, you went to university when you were 15 and a half?
No, I was at...
Because I know you're brilliant.
No, I was at yeshiva when I was 15 and a half, but from 17 on, I was at the University of Chicago.
Chicago's a funny place.
Good place.
I mean, Woody Allen, Mr. Kelly's.
Mr. Kelly's, yes. I have to brag a little bit. I hold all the records at Mr. Kelly's because my whole career started in Chicago. I was in Second City. I saw them at the University of Chicago, and I followed them like a kid follows the circus. I mean, had no idea what I was going to do. The teachers were always perplexed with me because I seemed to show some gift at something. What was I going to do? I saw Second City, and I just said, I do what they're doing. And I was there for years, for 5 years with Second City. And then when I got known in the States, I was actually known in New York, and did the Tonight Show. I came back and did Mr. Kelly's, but I had a following from Chicago, so at 1 o'clock at night I was doing a Full House.
It's got to be one of the highlights of your professional career.
Probably my favorite time
is Johnny Carson going on the Tonight Show over and over. It's
yes.
like amazing.
Yes.
It was almost the David Steinberg show.
Yes, he and I hit it off incredibly. We were good friends. I did, Bob hoped the most, I did the second most shows as a guest. And he used to call on me and Bob Newhart a lot because he could call us in the last minute. Bob was for the improvisational like I was. And I said to Bob once that I was so flattered that Johnny called us all the time. He said, yeah, he said, I asked him about this. He said he liked it that we bombed all the time. Whenever we would bomb, he would laugh, so we would laugh, and so we were comfortable with him. But he was remarkable, and that was, I can't imagine, it was my career, actually.
I mean, that was brought up on a special broadcast of David Susskind that we air. We aired the old versions of the David Susskind show, and this one we've showed several times with you and Mel Brooks. I mean,
yes.
It's a classic.
Yes, you know, that show, Mel Brooks and I were going to dinner that night, and I was not going to do the show. Because I was on the Tonight Show all the time, I was very selective about what I was going to do. So Mel said, we're just going to stop off here for a second, and then we'll go. We were going to Elaine's. And I stopped off, and I didn't know what he said. I got to pick something up. I said it didn't look like an apartment building, but anyway, it was Westinghouse Studios. And we went in, and it was an audience there, and it was the Susskind show, and Mel had committed me to the Susskind show without even asking me. So I said, I don't want to be doing this. I'm on the Tonight Show next week, and I'll get overexposed and all that. And I was so young that I just sort of said, I'm just sorry, I'm not doing this show. And Mel just schlepped me on stage, and I would say that show moved my career up by 5 years.
Really?
And even more, because it became a staple. Every year in New York on New Year's, they ran it for 10 or 11 years, and it still got the ratings almost every night. It's mostly Mel. Mel is on fire in that show. He's so funny. He and I had just connected, so that was great. And Susskind was fun. You know, you could make fun of him. You know, I remember Mel immediately said, "This is Jewish sons or sons of Jewish mothers," whatever he called. Mel said to Susskind immediately, "David, how much do you send home a week? I mean, what do you send?" He started to play with him immediately. So, and we were away, and I said some things on that show that even to this day are considered controversial.
Give us an example, and then we'll show a clip anyway of it.
At one point, Susskind said, "How do you bring an Italian girl home to your traditional Jewish family?" And I said, "Oh, that's very easy. You bring a black girl home first."
First, right.
Yes, right. But I was
And
not.
for those days, by the way, that was
still radical.
really
Yeah.
amazing.
But my whole first stand, it was all about my father's prejudice. So it wasn't like I was endorsing this as a plan in which to court anybody. So that's controversial even to this day.
Recordings, the old record, now of course that's disappeared,
Yes, sadly.
the vinyl.
Yes.
But I recall an album that you did on basically the Bible,
Yes.
which you're talking about crossing over the border. Now, you know that I personally have, because I used to play this on my radio show for years, one special treat about Moses.
Yes.
Now, can you tell me in your own words again that I think our audience will enjoy this?
Well, it's a little hard to do because basically I was playing a Reformed rabbi who didn't really know much about what he was talking about, and I'll just do the one, but I'll just give you the lines.
Right.
Moses is raised in the palace of the Pharaoh. He goes wandering in the desert, and he sees a bush that is burning, yet it will not consume itself. A voice comes out, "Moses, take off your shoes from off of your feet." I say, God said in his redundant way, "For the land that you are standing upon is holy land." Moses takes his shoes off of his feet, approaches the burning bush, burns his feet. God goes, "Aha, third one today."
So now every time I see you, David, I go 3.
That's the 3.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
That's a classic.
Yes.
any repercussions from rabbis and
No,
ultra-Orthodox?
The follow-up line to that got repercussions, which was after Moses burns his feet and God goes, aha, third one today, I said, Moses swore, we're not sure what he said. There are many Old Testament scholars who to this day believe it was the first mention of Christ in the Bible. Yeah, that was the controversial line.
Right.
Just a Jew saying Christ at that time was considered, controversial. That was that album was called The Incredible Shrinking God. Yeah.
How important is Jewish humor today in the American scene? I mean, Curb Your Enthusiasm seems to me to be the hottest Jewish program on television.
Yes, yes. Well, Jews and humor is always a big question. There was a time, I thought, when the ghetto community always owned maybe the sports and humor in a way. So the first version of the NBA were always Jewish basketball players. And then when African American players were allowed in, then they took over and all that. It always seems to me that the community that has the least becomes very strong in comedy. So the Latino community now, you're starting to hear their comedians coming around. The Jewish comedians were always sort of on the outside looking in. I remember the comedy stars who were legendary could never use their own names. Jack Benny and Alan King and Joey Bishop. I like that they used clerical names, bishop and a king and royalty. If you're going to take a name,
right,
why not make it something that's important? But I don't think that any ethnic group really owns a piece of the comedy like the Borscht Circuit, and I don't say that pejoratively, but the Borscht Circuit, the Catskill comedians did in the 50s, and then the first Buddy Hackett and Shecky Green and all those Vegas comedians did. It was just known. You have an Italian singer and a Jewish comedian. And those two minorities somehow.
And who opened for who?
It usually was the singer opening for the comedian, but it shifted after a while, and then they were opening for the singers.
You probably won't recall this, but you were gracious enough to entertain at the 20th anniversary of my company, which is now close to 50 years. But. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting next to you at the dinner, and you were a little concerned about the fact that everybody in the audience was Jewish.
Yes,
that this was not typical for you.
No, it was not. It was not. Because I didn't do a bar mitzvah speech. Basically, I made fun of being Jewish. So I was comfortable doing that because I'm comfortably Jewish.
Well, that's a good thing. It
Yeah.
probably came from your not-so-funny mother and your
Yes.
funny father.
Yes. Yes.
But your mother had to be funny once in a while. There must have been
just to live with my father, you had to be funny, right? But I was growing up. My older brother would have been like 16 years older than me, so my mother had to go through that when I was growing up. So the best thing that happened to me is that they couldn't be parenting me, and that was ecstasy so far as I was concerned. I was on my own, and I had a great time. Winnipeg was, strong boundaries and borders, so it was great.
David Steinberg today. I know you're occasionally part of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I direct Curb Your Enthusiasm, yes.
And that you have this wonderful series about comedy.
Yes.
On Showtime.
Yeah, Inside Comedy, yes. Second season, I was working at it today, actually.
And you actually work on it yourself on a computer.
Yes, well, I don't want to take credit for the computer. My editor does all the computer work because it's so complicated. But I work with my editor in New York, and I can edit in my jammies. And, if I could perform in my jammies, I'd still be performing a lot more than I do. It's just that I have to leave the house.
You don't like leaving the house?
I like it occasionally.
Once in a while you have to do that,
Yes.
You have to go out a little fresh air. It doesn't hurt.
Get some food.
And what else keeps you busy? I know commercials.
Directing keeps me busy. I just recently was doing a one-man show in La Jolla that seemed to have some life to it. People liked it a lot, and so now I'm exploring that. But I stay busy. I like I've always, I don't just like what I do, I've loved what I do. I feel really lucky that I found what I could do. Because there was a while back where no one would have bet on me at all, including me.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
What was it that window where you felt that?
It was being in Chicago. It was being away from home, being in Chicago. I thought I was going to be I taught Hebrew to support myself. So I thought I'd be a teacher. I was in education. When I went to Israel on a scholarship, it was with B'nai Akiva. I was still Orthodox at the time. So all of these things, no one knew where I was going to end up. The rabbis at the yeshiva might not have been surprised that I ended up being a comedian, but almost everyone else did.
What would you like to do?
I'm doing it.
Everything?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm working now, interviewing the biggest comedians in the country, and a show that's one that I love doing. I direct and work with Larry David, who is as much fun to be with as a human being could be, and is a friend of mine. And I'm still doing a one-man show. I'm describing this. As I'm describing it, I'm saying, God, I wish I was doing all those things, and I realize I am.
You are doing it.
Yes.
And so you are blessed.
Yes.
I'm glad you never met my Aunt Fanny, who lived a block away.
She would have knocked me down.
You might have to go for some therapy still
Yes.
today. But I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Phil.
And your friendship.
Yes, we've been
your
friends for a long
involvement-
time.
Yeah, your involvement, and just feeling good about the network and everything. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
David Steinberg.
Thank you, Phil.
We'll be back more on Main Street, Portage and Main, Winnipeg. There we go. Main Street, right after this.